What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Voice, and you're here for another Facts Project review. Today we are covering REGiCiDE, issue 1 for Image Comics, Patrick Kindlow and Ludovic Lalliat. Now, when I first basically got introduced to the comic itself, reading it upon its first few pages, you come to realize the thought of maybe like an A24 movie going through your head. And probably because of the reason that I just recently watched The Green Knight, probably for like the third time, right? But this particular comic book has historical context. So if you think about two ways this could go about, for one, as I talked about, the historical prowess that is basically embarked throughout this entire book. But then there's also like the exaggerated mythology of like a tall tale and legend. So here we get introduced to a very Dr. Doomish type character in a metal-faced shield in search of someone. And this someone that he needs for an incoming battle is a warrior, but something that no one has ever seen before. And the town that we're talking about is very old Romania. The very first frame in lettering is, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Terra Rumenieska, right? And this is pretty much old Romania. And if you look it up, as I usually do with a lot of like the context that you see historically or geographically that a lot of good comic book creators do, is you look up the fact that this town had a real province in Romania called Wallachia, right? And this kind of like revolves around the entire story itself, even by the title of the comic itself. So regicide, by definition, means the act of killing a king. So it's pretty much the destruction of a monarchy, or better yet, an execution of a monarchy, whether it be a king or a queen that might be deemed poisoned by its own people, right? So when we're looking at this metal-framed Dr. Doomish type character, he's in search of a warrior, just one, not an army, but just one warrior. And you see in the beginning frames of this issue of him staring into a farmland and watching a very, very, very large individual just hack wheat throughout a field. He's bigger than most men. So if you think about like the tall tales and legends that we've learned growing up as a kid, Paul Bunyan, Pecos Bill, John Henry, larger than life characters, right? Probably more exaggerated than anything. I usually talk about the fact that people talk about Paul Bunyan being this very large guy who just happened to be walking around with like an ox, a blue ox or a blue bull. Was probably more than likely just a very tall guy, probably not abnormally tall, but just a really tall guy. And he was walking around with a bull that was probably about the same size as him, almost like a pet. But people had exaggerated the tale so much that it became legend. So I'm sure the tale of somebody of this stature in a very old time had been talked about probably person to person until it reached this guy, in order for him to find out if the rumors were true. And if the rumors are true, I need him on my side. So he comes to this village, and the village doesn't even look like it has that many people. But he wants to speak to the elders about a fight to maintain the sovereignty of its country and the need for this farmer by the name of Mihas to basically join him on this mission. And Mihas is really confused by this, because he's like thinking to himself, I'm just a farmer. You know, most of the elders in this village and most of the other farmers have seen me kill animals before, but that's pretty much it. Some of the opening frames, you see him kill a viper, with his bare hands. Like one of the other farmers sees it in the grass, he grabs it with his bare hands and just squeezes the hell out of it. But he proceeds to be very confused by this. He was like, why of all people that need to be taken on this mission? And for one, why are you sending me on a mission? I'm just a farmer. But alas, wakes up in the morning and he decides to go with the gentleman, the man in the iron mask. And for the most part, you know, he's asking him, where's his horse? And he was like, well, I'm too big for horses. I've never learned to ride one. And he was like, can we get you a horse that's like big enough for you to ride? And he was like, I just never learned. So he decides to basically take this path of just walking this entire way. He's almost as tall as the guy riding on his horse. So he's just that big. I guess for the most part, you come to find out early that this man in the iron mask is pretty much, it's known what his mission is. So therefore, he starts talking to the farmer about the king, or better yet, who this warlord. So I had to look this up as well. The gentleman that they talk about that runs Terra Romanesca is Basarab. And Basarab is known as a voivode, which is basically like a warlord in Romanian. So this is probably somebody that was put into power because of his military might or his military victories, and given kind of like the title of maybe like a king or maybe just another dictator, right? And the man in the iron mask is explaining to Mihas that pretty much he's poisoned from within. Like there's kind of like no going back. He's starving his own people. His military is basically being set up just by the secrets of what is happening amongst his rule, and he's executing people at whim. And as they're crossing this hill, they tend to meet up with like 3 or 4 individuals who Mihas just basically deems as beggars, but they're not beggars. They're there to assassinate them just coming over the hill because they're heading in a certain direction to where they're actually going. And the man in the iron mask just sees this as a test for Mihas to see if basically the legends, or better yet, the exaggerations, were true. And Mihas dismantles these 4 individuals who are attacking them with just a set of daggers in every hand, crushing them with his bare hands. He has no weapons. He's not fighting with anything of brute strength. He's using his bare hands. His brute strength is himself. And he's just getting the job done mercilessly, but also very easily. And they continue on this journey until they reach this particular city where we finally learn the man in the iron mask name for the very first time. And his name is Duro. And the lady that they are introduced to meeting is Lalliat. And Lalliat is a strange character. When you come to meet her, you think that this entire thing is weird, because Duro, as we now know what his name is, him and Mihas are basically walked into a chamber with a dining room table, a very large one. Looks like it could seat maybe around 12 to 14 people. And yet there is a spread on this dining room table of a buffet of sorts. And Duro is basically saying, you know, or better yet, Lalliat is saying, I could whip you up something real quick. And he was like, well, you look like you cooked enough food for all of us. And she says something very strange. No, this is all for me. You see all this food for a young lady sitting at the table, you would think, okay, she's either really hungry, got a tapeworm, suffers from bulimia, not too sure exactly what is up, but if she's going to devour this entire thing, she is just either going through a lot, or there's something seriously wrong. And what tends to happen next is something that you don't expect. And I gotta say that the illustrations in this book by Ludovic, Lalliat, are extravagant, especially when it comes to this next coming scene, because what Mihas starts to see are the people that are surrounding the table. I guess more so the helpers or the servants have these very weird antennae sticking out of their necks. And when Lulia stands up to approach Duro for the first time, you see that she is like part millipede and has a very long thorax leading to a tail that's wrapping directly around this dining room table. And she basically is trying to pounce on Duro, basically saying that Basarab took it easy on you, but that is not my inclination, to try to destroy Duro. Slightly and very, I'm going to say easy enough, Duro handles Lulia very quickly. And the way that he does it after an attack is that you start to see either a spell start to happen, even though he's battling her with a sword, but it seems as though he is drinking her life force away from her. And that pretty much symbolizes that particular part of the first issue. Now, when I say the particular part of that first issue, is because there's 3 parts to this. There is 2 follow-up short stories after a full 22-page spread of basically Mihas and Duro continuously walking probably after the after effects of what they've done with Lulia. And they come to find that they're being spied on, but not by humans, by bees. The bees are having a conversation with one another about where Duro and Mihas are going, and that they have to alert Basarab. Totally different art direction. And I will even say this, that there is even the context of not only that part, because I believe that second one is done by Pramono Estu. That is the art direction for the second short story. It's probably around like 2 to 3 pages tops, right? And then you get The Monastery, which is like the third short story by Patrick Kindlow and Matt Battaglia. And you see basically almost a continuation of their talk in the woods about the men in his village only seeing him fight animals, but never men. And basically, you know, Duro is just reminding him that that's fine. Mankind is the least of our worries, because you come to find that most of the things that are actually hunting them are a little bit more supernatural. When I say that Basarab might be poisoned from within, there is a supernatural capability. Basically, you see it firsthand with Lulia lunging from that dining room table that is interacting with this. When you see that previous short story, the one that's basically done by Pramono Estu and Matt Kindlow, to where, you know, the bees are just like, you know, he's trying to just swat them away, but yet they're listening into their conversation. So this is an interesting one. I want to follow this as much as possible because I like Kindlow's work, and I can't wait to talk about this more. So look out for more of this, and I will be talking about more of it on the channel. So I'll see you guys next time.